Purpose of this video is to give you some suggestions for the Module 2 section on language learners. That's this section right here. There's an introduction where I'm basically making the same suggestions that are in the introduction. There's two reading files for the two quizzes that are in this section. The first reading goes with the first quiz and the second reading with the second quiz. So the first thing we're going to look at is the readings to go with the quiz. And the first reading starts out with some of the important court cases that led to the current legal requirements for teaching, working with language learners in the schools. What I suggest you do for most of the reading is to skim through the reading materials. There's quite a bit of information in here. You may want to take notes, and what I mean by notes mainly would be to jot down where things are located in the reading materials, so that when you're taking the quiz, which is basically open note, you can come back to the reading materials and find things that you need to find to understand and try to answer the questions on the quizzes. The quiz itself, the first quiz, deals with at least a couple of these legal issues. So you're only looking at maybe 2 or 3 questions at most dealing with the court cases. And that means you just need some basic information about the court cases to answer the questions. Again, I wouldn't take the time to read all the way through these, but make note of where they are, get a sense of what the most important part of the court case was, and if you do that, you'll be able to quickly answer those questions on the quiz. Okay, moving through the document, another part of the quiz is dealing with some of the terminology that we're using involving language learners, and we're looking at issues involving cultural bias. So we want to get a sort of a firm grasp of the terminology, and I'll come back to that in a second. Now, we're on page 11 of this document, and this is an article. The article involves culturally responsive pedagogy. If you've not come across this term before, let me just say that it's one of the critical issues or topics in teaching and working with language learners. To be a culturally responsive teacher is very important these days. So you need to go through this article. Again, I wouldn't read it with any close detail, but you need to understand what it means to be a culturally responsive teacher. And another thing that is important about reading through this particular article is on the upcoming assignment after this language learner quiz section, you're going to be working on your lesson plans, and those lessons plans require you to address your various students who need various accommodations in instruction, and your language learners are one group of those students. So this article will give you some ideas about how to accommodate your language learners in the classroom. Okay, now we come back to some of the terminology that's going to be on this first quiz. You just need to know the basic definitions of these terms, and there's maybe 2 or 3 questions on the quiz specifically addressing this terminology. Okay, the next thing we're going to get into, let me back up a bit because I passed over it here, is dealing with language acquisition. And there are stages of language acquisition. This page here on linguistic diversity has 2 links. One link is to a video and the other link is to a chart. You're going to need to, at the very least, have this chart in front of you when you do the quiz. The video is also excellent for really getting a sense of seeing what's going on at the different levels of language learning. So you might want to take a look at that video. It does provide an excellent overview of the different stages of language learning. So starting with the first stage and then moving on through those stages of language acquisition. The chart, it's this chart, is going to be a great resource when you're going through the quiz, and there'll be some questions on there about the different stages of language acquisition. So here they are. You see you've got the 1st through 4th stages on the chart, and the way the chart is set up, it gives you characteristics of the language learners to start out with at the different stages. So this is knowing what those language learners are dealing with. The second part here gives you some sample student behaviors. If you remember when I quickly showed that video, it was looking first at the first stage, and it showed this is the silent period for those language learners. On the next page of the chart, you have sample teacher behaviors. So now we're looking at the kinds of things that teachers should be doing working with students at the different stages of language acquisition. And then the third and last page on this chart looks at teaching strategies. So don't forget about this chart, because these are the strategies that you want to integrate into your lesson plans to show that you're accommodating your language learners. Now, how are you going to know what stage your language learners are at when you're working on your lesson plans? Going back to the instructional design plan that was in Module 1, and let me just briefly show that to you. Again, if you remember, we looked at this, so there were 4 sections in the instructional design plan. These 4 sections become your final project. You've just recently completed the unit outline. You still have to include, if you haven't already, the literacies in there, but I'll mention that again later. After this language learner quiz section, we're moving into the lesson plans. So looking at this lesson plan section, and also this section 2 here has been made into a page in D2L with this exact same information that you're seeing on this document. Going down to section G, you've been given information on the kinds of students that are in your classroom that you're developing these lesson plans for. You've got 30 students, a couple gifted students, etc. For this section that we're looking at, language learners, in part C here, you've got 5 language learners. And this information is basically what you have to do to deal with your language learners. It says here 2 of them are at the intermediate and 3 are advanced stages of language acquisition. So that's something you need to keep in mind when you're working on your lesson plans, and in your accommodations section you'll be addressing all of these students. That's pretty much it for this first file and quiz. There's additional information on working with language learners near the end of this file. Again, this will be important when you're developing your lesson plans. It gives you additional ideas for working with language learners. In this chart you see working with helping them develop cognitive skills using graphic organizers. These are the kinds of things you need to talk about in your lesson plans for accommodating your language learners, building their background knowledge, giving them directions, and that kind of thing. So please take a look at this and keep it in mind when you're working on your lesson plans. Okay, now that was the first reading and for the first quiz. Something about the quizzes: there are 20 items on the first quiz and 16 items on the second quiz. Those 20 items on the first quiz and on both quizzes are basically multiple choice items. You might find a matching type of question or item on one of these, but basically they're multiple choice. Be sure to answer with the best answer, because you'll see, as you've seen, and I think when you were taking your PPR quiz, that sometimes it looks like there's more than one right answer, but it's always the best answer that you need to select for those items on the quizzes. Now, quiz 1 again, 20 items. You have one attempt for the quiz, but you have plenty of time to do it. I think it's been set at 240 minutes. Basically that's 4 hours. So to prepare for the quiz, I recommend that you have your readings in front of you. If you're doing it on computer, of course, you can have your reading material ready to read on the screen, and you can go back and forth from the reading material to your quiz and answer each question. As I also said before, if you have your notes in front of you, then when you come to an item on the quiz, you'll know where to go in the reading materials to answer those questions. And that's pretty much true for both of the quizzes. But let's take a look at the second reading material. This focuses mainly on a lot of rather complex terminology that's involved in language and language learning. Same advice again, I would scan through the terms, maybe take some notes as to where things are located, and then when you come to questions on the quiz, you'll know where to go to look up the terminology and answer the questions on the quiz. This reading also has a section on classroom management. That's an important issue focused specifically on language learners and classroom management, dealing with language learners. So be sure to take a look at this material. And that's pretty much it for the reading and for the quizzes. As I mentioned, the second quiz is 16 items, but you have the same amount of time if you need it to take that quiz. So plenty of time. Your materials that you need to answer the questions are in front of you. You can look things up and hopefully find everything you need to know about the quizzes. Okay.